I still have the receipt from that night, and every morning at exactly 3:33, it prints itself again with my dead brother's name on it. I know how that sounds. I know receipts do not print from unplugged machines, and I know dead people do not wait for pickup in aisle 7. But I also know what I saw inside that closed Walmart on the edge of Ashford, Ohio, and I know there are 11 rules folded up in my kitchen drawer that should have been burned the second I made it home. I keep them anyway, sealed in a freezer bag, because part of me is afraid that if I throw them out, the place will think I forgot. I have not stepped inside a Walmart since. I cannot walk past those automatic doors without feeling my throat close up. I cannot hear the beep of a scanner without my hands going cold. The worst part is the smell. That clean, stale mix of floor wax, cardboard, plastic toys, and old air conditioning. Most people smell it and think of groceries, cheap socks, motor oil, and last-minute Christmas shopping. I smell it and remember standing alone under white fluorescent lights while every checkout lane opened at once, even though the store had been permanently closed for 6 months. I remember the intercom breathing before it spoke. I remember a shopping cart rolling out of the darkness with something in it that no store should have known about. And I remember Rule 7, written in black marker on a sheet of copy paper, like whoever wrote it had been shaking too badly to keep the letters straight. If Caleb Miller calls you from aisle 7, do not say you're sorry. That is how it learns your voice. Caleb was my younger brother. He had been dead for 3 years. No one connected to that job should have known his name, and no one should have known that sorry was the only word I had been choking on since the night he died. I'm telling this now because last night the receipt changed. For 3 years, it only said Caleb Miller, aisle 7, not yet scanned. But this morning, the paper was warm when I found it. The ink was fresh, and underneath my brother's name, it said one more line. Ethan Miller is ready for pickup. Ethan Miller had never been the kind of man who believed his life was supposed to turn out special. By 31, he had learned to measure success in smaller things, like making rent before the late fee hit, keeping his old Ford Focus running through another Ohio winter, and finding enough overtime to buy groceries without checking his bank account in the checkout line. He had worked warehouses, stockrooms, loading docks, seasonal retail, and one miserable year counting damaged pallets for a distribution center outside Columbus. None of it was glamorous, but it was honest, and more importantly, it made sense. Boxes came in. Boxes went out. Barcodes matched numbers. Numbers became reports. Reports told managers what they wanted to hear. That was the kind of world Ethan understood, the kind where everything had a place and every mistake could be traced back to a label, a form, or a person too tired to double-check a shipment before signing off on it. Then the layoffs came in February, right after the company announced record profits in the same email that said half the night inventory team was being eliminated. Ethan remembered sitting in his car in the parking lot after they walked him out, holding a cardboard box with 2 hoodies, a dented travel mug, and a handheld scanner he had forgotten to return. Snow drifted across the windshield in thin white lines, and for almost 10 minutes he did not move. He just stared at the warehouse doors, waiting for anger to show up, but all he felt was a hollow kind of exhaustion. By March, his savings were gone. By April, his landlord started leaving polite voicemails that got less polite every week. By May, Ethan was eating peanut butter sandwiches over the sink and selling off anything he could pretend he did not need. The television went first, then his gaming console, then the small collection of baseball cards Caleb had given him for his 25th birthday, which hurt worse than he expected because Caleb had never cared about baseball. He had bought them because Ethan did, and because Caleb was the kind of younger brother who remembered small things even when he pretended not to. Caleb had been dead for 3 years by then, but Ethan still caught himself reaching for his phone whenever something stupid happened, like the sink backing up or the neighbor's dog getting loose again. Caleb would have laughed, told him he was cursed, and shown up with gas station coffee and some half-baked plan that somehow worked. That was what Ethan missed most. Not the big moments. The ordinary ones. The stupid late-night calls. The arguments about music. The way Caleb would knock twice on the door and then come in anyway. The guilt had dulled over time, but it had not gone away. It sat in the room with him like a second piece of furniture, quiet until the lights went off. Some nights, when money was tight and the apartment was too still, Ethan could hear the last voicemail Caleb had left him before the accident. "Hey, I am almost there. Do not do anything dumb before I get there." Caleb had been driving through rain on County Road 18 because Ethan had called him from a bar, too drunk to get home and too ashamed to call a rideshare he could not afford. The police said it was bad weather, bad timing, and a pickup truck that hydroplaned through a stop sign. Everyone told Ethan it was not his fault. Ethan learned that people said that because they did not know what else to say. Fault was not always legal. Sometimes fault was just knowing that if you had stayed home, someone else would have too. By early summer, Ethan stopped opening the mail. He let the envelopes pile up on the kitchen counter, white and yellow and pink, each one another reminder that real life did not pause because you were grieving. The final notice from the electric company came on a Thursday morning, folded under the door like it was ashamed to be there. His landlord called that afternoon and said he needed at least half the rent by Monday or they would have to start the process. Ethan thanked him like an idiot, hung up, and laughed once, short and dry, because there was nothing else to do. That night, he searched for temporary work until his eyes burned. Inventory assistant, overnight stocker, janitorial crew, security desk, anything within 40 miles of Ashford. Most paid too little, started too late, or wanted references from managers who had stopped answering his calls. Just after midnight, he found the listing on a local job board that looked like it had not been updated since 2009. One night inventory verification. Closed retail location. 10 o'clock at night to 6 o'clock in the morning. Must have warehouse or stockroom experience. Must be comfortable working alone. $600 cash upon completion. Ethan read it 3 times, waiting for the catch to appear. $600 was not life-changing money, but it was enough to keep the lights on, enough to stall the landlord, enough to buy another week of breathing room. The contact name was Grady Asset Recovery, and the location was an old Walmart on the far edge of town, a place Ethan remembered closing months earlier after the new supercenter opened closer to the highway. He had driven past it once or twice since then. The sign was still up, but the lot was empty, and weeds had started pushing through cracks near the garden center. It seemed sad more than scary, just another big dead store waiting for a buyer who probably would never come. Ethan told himself that was why the pay was high. It was last minute. It was overnight. It was boring work nobody wanted. He had counted inventory in worse places than a closed Walmart. At least there would be a roof, working lights, and no supervisor breathing down his neck about scan rates. He almost closed the laptop anyway. Something about the phrase working alone made his stomach tighten, and for one strange second he thought of Caleb, not as a memory, but as a warning. Then the refrigerator clicked off, the apartment sank into silence, and Ethan looked at the final notice on the counter. He typed his name, his phone number, and his experience into the application box before he could talk himself out of it. When he hit submit, the screen refreshed to a blank white page. Less than 1 minute later, his phone rang from a blocked number. The voice on the other end belonged to a man who sounded like he had been awake for several days and was trying not to let anyone hear it. He asked if he was speaking to Ethan Daniel Miller, and when Ethan said yes, the man gave a soft breath through his nose. Not quite a sigh, not quite relief. "My name is Harold Grady," he said. "I am handling the overnight verification at the old Ashford Walmart. You applied for the position." Ethan glanced at the laptop screen, still blank except for the spinning cursor in the corner. "I just sent that in," he said. There was a pause long enough that Ethan wondered if the call had dropped. Then Grady said, "We are moving quickly. Are you available tonight?" Ethan looked at the clock on the microwave. 12:13 in the morning. "You mean tonight, as in Friday night?" "Yes. 10 o'clock to 6 o'clock. One shift. Cash payment when the list is complete." Ethan should have asked why they were calling applicants in the middle of the night. He should have asked why a closed store needed inventory verified so urgently that they were hiring strangers off a local job board with no interview, no background check, and no paperwork beyond a name and phone number. Instead, he looked at the shut-off notice on his counter and heard himself ask what the job involved. Grady explained it like a man reading from something he had memorized too carefully. Ethan would enter through the employee door near the auto center. Inside, he would find a customer service desk with a scanner, a clipboard, and a set of keys. His job was to photograph certain sections, confirm what had been left behind after the liquidation crew cleared out, and scan any tagged items that still appeared on the asset list. He was not to remove anything from the building. He was not to invite anyone inside. He was not to open any locked door unless the clipboard instructed him to. That last part made Ethan sit up a little straighter. Locked doors? There are offices, storage cages, electrical rooms, Grady said. Standard retail layout. Nothing unusual. But he said it too quickly, like unusual was a word he wanted off the phone. Ethan rubbed at his eyes and asked if there would be anyone else working with him. Another pause. No. The building has to remain empty during verification. Insurance reasons. Ethan almost laughed at that. Insurance reasons was the kind of phrase people used when the real reason sounded worse. Grady continued before he could answer. You have stockroom experience. You have used handheld scanners. You understand inventory procedure. That is why you were selected. Selected made it sound like there had been a process, even though less than 5 minutes had passed since Ethan hit submit. The pay is $600, Ethan said, just to hear it confirmed. Cash, Grady replied. In an envelope. At sunrise, if the work is complete and you followed instructions. There it was. That small wrong note under the practical details. Ethan leaned back in his chair. What kind of instructions? The kind that keep the night simple. Grady's voice lowered. Mr. Miller, I need to ask you one thing, and I need an honest answer. Can you follow written directions exactly, even if they seem unnecessary at the time? Ethan stared at the dark kitchen window above the sink. His own reflection looked pale and thin in the glass. I worked warehouse inventory for 7 years, he said. Following written directions is most of the job. That is not what I asked. The flatness in Grady's tone made Ethan's fingers tighten around the phone. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere upstairs, a pipe knocked softly in the wall. Then Ethan thought about Monday, about rent, about the lights, about the kind of man he was becoming while sitting alone in an apartment he could not afford, waiting for his life to get worse. Yes, he said, I can follow directions. Grady gave another one of those almost sighs. Good. Be at the auto center entrance at 9:50. Do not be early by more than 5 minutes. Do not be late. Bring a flashlight, a phone charger, and something with sugar in it. Leave any personal religious items, weapons, or alcohol at home. Ethan frowned. Why would I bring alcohol to an inventory job? You would be surprised, Grady said. And for the first time, Ethan heard something close to fear under the man's tired voice. Then Grady gave him the address, told him not to use the front doors under any circumstances, and hung up before Ethan could ask another question. Ethan spent most of Friday pretending he was not going to take the job, even after he put fresh batteries in his flashlight, packed a phone charger, and bought a king-size chocolate bar from the gas station because Grady had told him to bring something with sugar in it. By 9:20 that night, he was driving east across Ashford with the heater blowing lukewarm air against his hands, even though it was June and the air outside should have been heavy and warm. The old Walmart sat past the last open strip mall, beyond a closed tire shop and a field of waist-high weeds where a developer had once promised luxury apartments. Ethan saw the sign before he saw the building. The big blue letters were still mounted above the entrance, but only 3 of them lit up, buzzing weakly against the dark like they were trying to remember what they used to be. The yellow Spark logo was dead except for one point that flickered every few seconds, throwing a pale flash across the empty parking lot. During the day, that lot had probably just looked abandoned. At night, it looked too large to belong to the world around it. Hundreds of parking spaces stretched out under tall lamps that had not all failed at once. Some glowed white, some flickered, some were completely dark. The painted lines had faded to gray, and weeds pushed through the cracks in long black seams. A single shopping cart sat upside down near the garden center, its wheels turning slowly even though there was no wind. Ethan slowed the car and watched it for a second longer than he meant to. Then he told himself the wheels were settling, or the asphalt was uneven, or he was tired enough to make motion out of nothing. He parked near the auto center at 9:52, close enough to the employee entrance that he could leave quickly if this turned into some kind of scam. The moment he shut off the engine, the silence pressed against the windows. Not normal quiet. Not the comfortable kind you get in a sleeping neighborhood. This was the silence of a place built for noise after all the noise had been removed. No carts rattling. No families arguing over school supplies. No cashier calling for a price check. No music leaking through ceiling speakers. Just the distant electrical hum of lights that should not have been on inside a building that had been closed for months. Ethan stepped out, and the air smelled like wet pavement, rust, and old trash baked into the edges of the lot. Somewhere far off, A dog barked once and then stopped abruptly. He looked toward the front doors out of habit, but remembered Grady's warning and forced his eyes away. The glass entrance was dark except for his reflection and the faint glow of checkout lights somewhere deep inside. For one uncomfortable second, he thought he saw someone standing just beyond the doors, a heavy shape in a blue vest, facing outward. Then one of the parking lot lamps flickered, and the shape became a stack of carts behind the glass. The auto center entrance was a plain gray metal door set into the side of the building beneath a sign advertising tires and oil changes that no one would ever buy there again. A small envelope was taped beside the handle with Ethan Miller written across it in black marker. His full name looked wrong out here, too personal against the dead side of a dead store. Inside the envelope was a key card, a temporary badge with no photo, and a note that said swipe once, enter, and do not hold the door open behind you. Ethan stared at that last sentence for a long moment. Behind him, the lot was empty. He turned slowly anyway, sweeping his flashlight over the parked nothing, the cracked asphalt, the dead garden center, the upside-down cart. Nothing moved. He swiped the card. The reader flashed green, and the lock clicked with a sound that seemed much too loud. Cold air breathed out through the gap as soon as he opened the door. It carried the stale smell of cardboard, floor wax, plastic packaging, and something faintly sweet underneath, like spilled soda dried into tile years ago. Ethan stepped inside and let the door close immediately behind him. The click of the latch echoed down a corridor lined with employee posters that had curled at the corners. One still said "Safety starts with you." Another showed a smiling associate giving a thumbs up beside words that had faded to pale blue. The hallway opened into the main store near customer service, and Ethan stopped before he crossed the threshold. He had been inside that Walmart a dozen times when it was open, but without people it felt impossible. The ceiling seemed higher. The aisles seemed longer. The fluorescent lights glowed in uneven strips, leaving sections of the store in pockets of gray shadow. Empty shelves ran in long rows across the floor, their metal edges catching the light like ribs. Far above him, security cameras rested under black domes, each one angled down toward the lanes as if the building had been waiting for someone to arrive. The customer service desk sat ahead, half hidden behind abandoned return bins and a stack of dusty shopping baskets. On the counter were the scanner, the clipboard, a ring of keys, and a folded sheet of white copy paper placed with deliberate care. Ethan walked toward it, his footsteps sounding too sharp on the tile. As he reached the desk, the overhead intercom popped softly. Static breathed through the ceiling speakers for 3 seconds, then went quiet. Ethan froze with one hand over the folded paper. From somewhere deep in the store, far beyond the dark shape of aisle 7, a shopping cart squeaked once and stopped. Ethan kept his hand on the folded paper for several seconds without opening it, listening to the empty store settle around him. The shopping cart sound did not repeat. The intercom stayed quiet. Somewhere above the grocery section, a fluorescent tube buzzed with a thin insect sound that made his teeth ache. He told himself the paper was probably a checklist, maybe some weird legal disclaimer, maybe instructions from Grady written by a man who had spent too many years dealing with break-ins and liability claims. But his fingers had already gone cold before he unfolded it. The sheet was ordinary copy paper, creased twice, stained at one corner with a brown ring like old coffee. Across the top, written in black marker, were the words "Overnight Verification Rules." Under that, in smaller letters, someone had added, "Read all 11 before beginning. Do not assume any rule is a joke." Ethan swallowed, glanced toward the dark aisles, then looked back down and read. Rule 1. Start at customer service. End at customer service. Do not begin the count anywhere else, even if the scanner tells you to. Rule 2. If a cart rolls by itself, let it pass. Do not touch the handle. Do not stop it with your foot. Do not look inside until it has come to a complete stop on its own. Rule 3. If the intercom calls for a cleanup in an aisle that does not exist, ignore it. This store has 12 numbered grocery aisles, 6 general merchandise aisles, and 1 seasonal aisle. There is no aisle 13. There has never been an aisle 13. Rule 4. Do not scan items without barcodes. If an item has no barcode, it is not merchandise. Place the scanner face down and back away until the screen goes dark. Rule 5. If you see a greeter at the front door after midnight, do not wave back. Do not smile. Do not nod. Acknowledge nothing at the doors unless it casts a shadow under the parking lot lights. Rule 6. If a child asks where his mother is, point toward the exit but do not walk with him. Do not ask his name. Do not let him hold your hand. If he cries, keep walking. Rule 7. If Caleb Miller calls you from aisle 7, do not say you are sorry. That is how it learns your voice. Ethan stopped reading. The whole store seemed to tilt very slightly around him, not enough to see, but enough for his stomach to drop like he had missed a step in the dark. For a moment, he could not hear the lights or the air conditioning or his own breathing. All he saw was Caleb Miller written in thick black marker on a piece of paper that had been waiting inside a closed Walmart before Ethan ever walked through the door. He stared at the name until the letters stopped looking like letters and became shapes. Caleb Miller. Not Caleb. Not your brother. Not some lucky guess from a stranger who had searched his name online and found an obituary. Caleb Miller, in a rule that sounded like it had been written for him alone. His first thought was that Grady had done this. Some cruel test. Some background check. Some terrible joke made by a man with no sense of where a line should be. But that did not explain the rest of the sentence. Do not say you are sorry. Ethan had never written those words anywhere. He had never posted about Caleb. He had never told coworkers the whole story. Even at the funeral, when his aunt put both hands on his shoulders and told him Caleb would not want him blaming himself, Ethan had only nodded. Sorry was the word he had kept locked behind his teeth for 3 years, the word that came up at night and stayed there until morning. He realized his thumb was rubbing the edge of the paper hard enough to bend it. He forced himself to keep reading because stopping felt worse. Rule 8. Frozen foods is safe only when the lights are white. If they turn red, get below eye level and crawl until the humming stops. Do not stand up while the glass doors are reflecting you. Rule 9. If your scanner displays your own name, put it down with the screen facing away from you and count backward from 100. If you hear yourself counting with you, skip the numbers that are repeated. Rule 10. At 3:33 in the morning, lane 11 will open. Do not scan the item on the belt. It will be something you recognize. It will not belong to you anymore. Rule 11. At sunrise, leave only through a door opened by someone who casts a shadow. If the automatic doors open by themselves, you are not being released. Under the last rule, written in a different hand, were 3 lines pressed so deeply into the paper that the marker had bled through. The scanner is not your supervisor. The intercom is not your friend. The store remembers what you bring in. Ethan lowered the page slowly. His mouth had gone dry, and there was a tightness behind his ribs that made each breath feel too small. He wanted to call Grady, but his phone showed no bars, only the gray outline of a signal that never filled in. He tried anyway. The call failed before it even rang. He looked at the customer service desk, at the scanner sitting in its charging cradle, at the clipboard with a printed asset list clipped neatly under a pen. Everything about the setup was practical and boring, which somehow made the rules worse. They were not carved into a wall or written in red paint like something from a haunted house. They were written on office paper and left beside inventory equipment, as if they were just another part of the job, no different than checking off returned patio chairs or damaged microwave ovens. Ethan picked up the scanner. The plastic was cold, colder than the air around him, and the screen blinked awake with a soft beep. For 1 second, it showed the normal login menu. Then the words changed. Begin at customer service, Ethan Daniel Miller. His hands tightened around the device. He had not typed his name. He had not scanned his badge. The scanner beeped again, polite and patient, the same sound he had heard 1,000 times in warehouses and stockrooms, except now it seemed to come from much farther away, as if something deep in the store had copied the noise and sent it back. On the clipboard, the first location was highlighted in yellow, customer service returns bin. Quantity 1. Description, unverified personal item. Ethan looked down into the nearest return bin. At first he saw only dust, plastic hangers, and a cracked phone case. Then, half buried under a faded blue vest, he saw a king-size chocolate bar, the exact brand he had bought from the gas station that afternoon and left unopened in his jacket pocket. His hand moved to his pocket before he could stop it. The chocolate bar was still there. The one in the bin had a white sticker across the wrapper. No barcode. Just a handwritten label that said for when you start feeling weak. From somewhere beyond the checkout lanes, a cart squeaked softly, rolled 3 feet, and stopped. Ethan stared at the cart from behind the customer service desk, waiting for it to move again. It sat just past the first row of checkout lanes, half in light and half in shadow, angled slightly toward him like someone had pushed it and then stepped away. His first instinct was to laugh, not because anything was funny, but because his mind needed somewhere to put the fear. Carts rolled on bad floors. Buildings shifted. Air vents kicked on and changed pressure. He had worked enough retail-adjacent jobs to know that empty places made noises, and tired people turned those noises into stories. He told himself all of that while his heart beat hard enough to make his throat pulse. Rule 2 came back to him anyway. If a cart rolls by itself, let it pass. Do not touch the handle. Do not stop it with your foot. Do not look inside until it has come to a complete stop on its own. The cart had stopped. That meant he could look inside. That was how rules worked, right? A condition, an action, an outcome. He raised the flashlight with a hand that did not feel steady and took one step from behind the desk. The scanner gave a soft beep in his other hand. The screen changed from the asset list to a single line of text. Item approaching. Do not interfere. Ethan stopped. The cart had not moved, but the front wheels were now turned slightly to the left. He was sure they had been pointing straight a second ago. The store around him seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a slow squeak of rubber and metal, the cart began to roll again. Not fast, not dramatically. It moved at the speed of someone browsing a grocery aisle, wheels wobbling over the tile, handle facing him, basket turned away so he could not see what was inside. Ethan backed toward the customer service counter until his hip hit the edge. Every part of him wanted to grab it. That was the stupidest thing, the most ordinary thing in the world, a shopping cart rolling through a store, and still his body reacted like something with teeth had come around the corner. The cart passed the end of the desk within arm's reach. The handle was scuffed gray plastic with old sticker residue on one side. As it rolled by, Ethan saw dark fingerprints pressed into the grip, too long and too close together to be normal. He lifted one foot without thinking, ready to stop the front wheel before it bumped the return bins, and caught himself so suddenly that his knee locked. The cart drifted past him, missed the bin by less than an inch, and continued toward the open space between customer service and the checkout lanes. Ethan did not touch it. He did not stop it. He did not look inside. He kept his eyes on the handle until it had rolled another 10 feet and came to rest beneath the flickering light over lane 4. The moment it stopped, the air conditioning shut off. The silence that followed was so complete that Ethan could hear the tiny electric tick inside the scanner. He waited, counting under his breath without knowing why. 1, 2, 3. At 30, he forced himself to walk toward the cart. The closer he got, the colder the tile felt through the soles of his shoes. His flashlight beam trembled over the metal basket. At first he thought it was empty. Then he saw the can lying in the bottom near the child's seat. A crushed beer can. Cheap brand. Silver and blue. One side dented inward where someone had squeezed it too hard. Ethan did not need to pick it up to know what it was. The room seemed to narrow around him, shrinking down to the cart, the can, and the sudden sour taste rising in the back of his mouth. It was the same brand he had been drinking the night Caleb died. More than that, it looked like the same can, which was impossible because Ethan remembered holding it on the curb outside the bar while rain ran down his neck and blue lights flashed against the wet road. He remembered crushing it in his fist after the officer said his brother's name. He remembered throwing it into the gutter because he could not stand to have it in his hand anymore. The scanner beeped. Ethan looked down. The screen now read, "Unscanned guilt detected. Please verify condition." His breath caught. The cart's front wheels twitched. Just once. Then the beer can rolled by itself from one side of the basket to the other and stopped with the drinking tab facing up. Ethan stepped back so fast his shoulder clipped the corner of a checkout display. The cart jerked toward him half an inch, like a dog testing the length of a leash. He remembered the rule again, too late and all at once. Let it pass. Do not touch the handle. Do not look inside until it stops. He had followed it. Barely. Maybe that was why the thing in the cart could only show him something instead of doing whatever it wanted to do next. The scanner beeped again, louder this time. A green line crawled across the screen like it was trying to read the can from 10 feet away. Ethan turned the scanner face down against his chest, even though Rule 4 was the one about barcodes, not this. The beeping stopped. The cart sat still beneath the flickering light. After a long moment, the air conditioning came back on with a heavy mechanical hum. The beer can was gone. In its place was a narrow white receipt curled in the bottom of the basket. Ethan did not pick it up. He did not need to. His flashlight caught the printed line at the top clearly enough from where he stood. Caleb Miller. Return incomplete. Ethan stood frozen beside lane 4, staring at the receipt in the bottom of the card until the ink blurred in his vision. His hand had gone numb around the flashlight. Part of him wanted to tear the receipt out, crumple it, throw it as far down the aisle as he could, and prove to whatever was watching that paper and ink could not hurt him. Another part, the smarter part, remembered that the rules had not told him to touch anything in the cart. They had only told him when he was allowed to look. That difference suddenly felt important. He backed away slowly, one step at a time, keeping the card in the edge of his vision without staring directly into it. The wheels did not move. The receipt did not flutter. Nothing reached for him. Still, he did not breathe right until he was behind the customer service desk again with the counter between him and the floor. The scanner screen had gone back to the normal asset list, which somehow made Ethan angrier. He wanted it to stay strange. He wanted it to keep showing impossible messages so he could point to them later and say that was proof. That was the moment reality broke. Instead, it displayed customer service returns bin, quantity 1, as if nothing had happened, as if a crushed memory from the worst night of his life had not just rolled up in a shopping cart and asked to be verified. He looked at the clock above the service desk. 11:48. He had been inside less than 2 hours, and his shirt was already damp under the arms. There were still more than 6 hours until sunrise. The thought made his knees feel weak. He forced himself to do the only thing that still made sense. He followed the list. The first item on the clipboard was the returns bin. He did not scan the chocolate bar with no barcode. He moved the scanner face down, stepped back until the screen went dark, and waited. At first nothing happened. Then, from inside the bin, the wrapper crinkled softly, like someone had squeezed it. A second later, the scanner beeped once and advanced to the next location, General Merchandise Aisle 2, Household Storage. Ethan almost laughed again, but the sound died in his throat when the intercom clicked on. A burst of static rolled through the ceiling speakers. Then a woman's voice, bright and professional, said, "Cleanup needed in aisle 13. Cleanup needed in aisle 13. Associate assistance required." Ethan closed his eyes. Rule 3. There was no aisle 13. The voice repeated the announcement with the exact same cheerful tone, only this time it sounded closer, as if the speaker above him had leaned down from the ceiling. Cleanup needed in aisle 13. He did not answer. He did not move toward it. He kept his eyes on the numbered aisle markers in the distance. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Nothing beyond 12 but the dark mouth of the seasonal section. The announcement stopped. For a moment, the store returned to its humming silence. Then something wet dragged across tile somewhere far away, slow and heavy, as if a mop bucket had tipped over and someone was pulling it by the handle. Ethan gripped the counter until his knuckles hurt. The sound passed behind the grocery aisles and faded near the back wall. When it was gone, a new smell drifted through the store, sharp and chemical, like lemon cleaner poured over old pennies. The scanner beeped and highlighted the household storage aisle again. It wanted him to leave the desk. Rule 1 had said start at customer service and end at customer service. It had not said stay there all night. Ethan checked the paper again, folded it smaller, and shoved it into his back pocket where he could feel its edges through the denim. Then he picked up the flashlight, held the scanner low, and stepped into the open floor. Every aisle looked longer once he was away from the desk. The overhead lights did not illuminate the store so much. As divided into sections of visibility and shadow, he passed checkout lanes with dark registers and conveyor belts that looked like black tongues resting behind plastic shields. Lane 11 sat at the far end, its light off, its number hanging crooked from the ceiling. Ethan avoided looking at it for too long. Household storage was mostly empty. A few cracked plastic bins sat nested on a bottom shelf, their lids stacked beside them in colors that had faded under years of fluorescent light. Ethan found the tag on the first bin, scanned it, and the device gave a normal chirp. Location verified. Quantity 3. For a brief, stupid second, relief spread through him. Maybe the night would be like that. Strange, yes, but manageable if he followed the rules. Beeps, tags, lists, one aisle at a time until morning. Then a small voice behind him said, "Mister?" Ethan's whole body locked. The voice came from the main walkway, soft and young and close enough that he could hear the tremble in it. He turned only his head. A boy stood beside an empty end cap about 15 feet away, maybe 8 years old, wearing a red winter coat despite the summer night. His hood was up, shadowing most of his face. One hand clutched the strap of a small backpack. "I cannot find my mom," the boy said. Ethan felt the rule rise in his mind before the fear could. Rule 6. If a child asks where his mother is, point toward the exit, but do not walk with him. Do not ask his name. Do not let him hold your hand. If he cries, keep walking. The boy took one small step forward. "Have you seen her?" Ethan lifted his arm and pointed toward the front of the store. "The exit is that way," he said, his voice coming out rough. "Keep walking straight." The boy did not look where Ethan pointed. He looked at Ethan's hand. "Can you show me?" "No." The words sounded cruel in the empty aisle. Ethan hated himself for saying it, but he said it anyway. "You need to go that way." The boy's shoulders rose and fell. A sniffle echoed from under the hood. When he spoke again, his voice was a little flatter. "She said you would help me." Ethan started walking backward, away from the child and toward the main aisle. The boy followed one step. Ethan stopped. The boy stopped. A thin, breathy sob came from the hood, but no tears fell. Ethan kept backing away. The boy lifted his face just enough for the light to touch where his features should have been. There were no eyes. Not empty sockets. Not anything dramatic. Just smooth skin where eyes belonged. Pale and unmarked like the blank face of a cheap mannequin. Ethan's stomach clenched so hard, he almost dropped the scanner. He turned and walked, not running, because running felt like permission for the store to chase him. Behind him, the boy began to cry louder. Then the crying changed. It stretched and thinned until it sounded like wheels squeaking on tile. Ethan did not look back. He reached the main walkway near electronics, just as every television on the wall flickered on at once. Most of them were dusty display models left behind after the liquidation, screens arranged in dark rows like sealed windows. Now they all glowed with the same grainy footage. A Tulane County road at night. Rain on a windshield. Headlights smeared across wet asphalt. Ethan stopped so abruptly his shoes squealed. The scanner beeped in his hand, but he barely heard it. On the screens, a phone lit up in a cup holder. The caller name was not visible, but Ethan knew that angle, knew that road, knew the way rain sounded when it hit glass hard enough to drown out the radio. Caleb had once sent him a video from his car as a joke because the wipers were failing and making a ridiculous squeal every few seconds. The sound played now from all the television speakers, out of sync by half a heartbeat. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Ethan's chest tightened until breathing hurt. Then the intercom popped, and a voice that was almost Caleb's whispered through the store, "You always hated that sound." Ethan stepped back. The televisions went dark one by one, except for the last screen in the corner. It showed Ethan himself standing in electronics, viewed from above by a security camera. But the Ethan on the screen was not holding a scanner. He was holding the folded rule sheet in one hand and waving at the front entrance with the other. At the edge of the image, beyond the automatic doors, the greeter stood in a blue vest, smiling from the dark glass. Ethan remembered Rule 5 and jerked his real hand down even though he had not raised it. The screen went black. From the front of the store, faint and patient, someone knocked on the glass doors 3 times. Ethan did not answer the knocking. He stood in electronics with the dark televisions behind him and the empty store stretching out in every direction, holding his breath like the sound might pass over him if he stayed still enough. 3 knocks on the glass doors. A pause. 3 more. Not louder, not impatient, just steady, polite, and wrong. The kind of knock someone gives when they already know you are home. He forced himself to turn away from the front entrance before his eyes could find the greeter. Rule 5 did not say what would happen if he waved back. It did not need to. The fact that the security screen had shown him doing it was enough. Something in the store was not only testing the rules. It was testing versions of him, showing him choices before he made them, maybe hoping he would copy one by accident. The scanner chirped softly, and the next location appeared on the screen, seasonal aisle. Verify remaining stock. Ethan looked toward the far side of the store where the seasonal section disappeared into a darker band of light beyond toys. His mouth went dry. Aisle 7 sat between him and that section. He checked the folded paper again, even though he had already memorized the rule that mattered most. If Caleb Miller calls you from aisle 7, do not say you are sorry. That is how it learns your voice. He almost went back to customer service. He almost planted himself behind the desk and waited for dawn no matter what the scanner said. But then every light over electronics shut off at once, leaving only the televisions reflecting his pale face back at him. The scanner beeped again. Seasonal aisle. Verification overdue. Somewhere near the front doors, the knocking stopped. A voice came through the intercom, not cheerful this time, not professional, but low and tired. Ethan Daniel Miller, please continue your count. Ethan froze. Rule 4 said never answer the intercom unless it said his full name correctly. It had. His thumb hovered over the scanner grip. He did not know if answering meant speaking out loud, pressing a button, or just obeying. The voice came again. Ethan Daniel Miller, please continue your count. Failure to verify remaining stock may result in return denial. Return denial. The words slid under his skin because he understood them without understanding why. If he stopped, if he refused to play along, maybe the store did not let him leave. Maybe it kept Caleb pending forever. Maybe it kept Ethan too. He turned toward the seasonal aisle and started walking. The store changed as he crossed it. Not dramatically. That would have been easier. Instead, it shifted in small retail ways, the kind a tired employee might notice during an overnight reset. An end cap that had been empty now held rows of school notebooks. A price sign swung gently above a shelf of plastic pumpkins, even though it was June. One aisle smelled like cinnamon pine cones. The next smelled like pool chemicals and sun-warmed rubber. Ethan passed a stack of lawn chairs that creaked as if someone invisible had just stood up from them. He kept walking. The scanner led him past grocery, past household storage, past sporting goods, and toward the part of the store where the toys had been left half cleared. The aisle marker hung crooked from the ceiling. 7. Ethan stopped before he entered. The air ahead looked thicker, the way heat rises off asphalt, except the aisle itself was cold enough that he could see a faint mist when he breathed. Shelves on both sides held scattered leftovers from a liquidation that had never quite finished. Dented board games, open boxes of plastic dinosaurs, off-brand dolls with missing shoes, toy trucks with dust in their wheels, clearance stickers faded to pale orange. At the far end, near a round security mirror mounted in the corner, something blue lay folded on the floor. Ethan knew what it was before his flashlight found it completely. Caleb's hoodie. Navy blue, white drawstrings, cracked lettering from a community college he had attended for one semester before deciding classes were boring and HVAC paid better. Ethan had not seen that hoodie since the funeral home. His first thought was not fear. It was anger. Hot, sudden, almost clean. The store could roll up old beer cans. It could make blank-faced children. It could play footage on dead televisions. But this felt different. This felt like theft. Ethan took one step into the aisle. The scanner vibrated hard in his hand. Not a beep. A vibration, like an incoming call. The screen read, item found. Caleb Miller. Condition, damaged. Return to family? Yes or no? Ethan's thumb moved before his mind caught up. Yes. Of course yes. Any brother would press yes. Any decent human being would press yes if the alternative was leaving him on a cold tile floor in a closed store with dust on his sleeves. His thumb hovered above the button, trembling so hard the screen blurred. Then a voice came from the far end of the aisle. Ethan? His legs went weak. It was Caleb. Not exactly, not perfectly, but close enough that the difference hurt. The voice was younger than it should have been, a little muffled, like it was coming through a wall or a phone pressed against wet fabric. Ethan, I do not want to be here anymore. Ethan's chest tightened. He lowered the scanner, but his thumb still hovered over the screen. The hoodie shifted on the floor. Something beneath it rose and settled like a person breathing under a blanket. Ethan knew the rule. He knew it with the same certainty he knew his own address. Do not say you are sorry. The problem was that he was sorry. He was sorry in his bones. He had been sorry every morning when he woke up and every night when the apartment went quiet. He had been sorry when he sold the baseball cards, sorry when he ignored his mother's calls, sorry when he passed the bar where he had called Caleb that last time. Sorry had become the shape of his life, and now his brother's voice was asking him to step closer. The scanner flashed again. Return to family? Yes or no? Ethan swallowed so hard it hurt. Caleb, he said, then stopped. The aisle went perfectly still. Every doll head on the shelves turned toward him at once with tiny plastic clicks. Ethan clamped his mouth shut. He had said the name. The rule had not forbidden that. It had forbidden the apology. But the store reacted anyway, interested now, listening with more than speakers. At the end of the aisle, the hoodie lifted as if someone were sitting up beneath it. A hand appeared from inside one sleeve, pale and familiar, wearing the braided bracelet Caleb had made at some summer camp when they were kids and refused to take off for years because Ethan said it looked dumb. Ethan's eyes burned. The hand reached toward him. "It is okay," the voice said. "Just say it. I know you want to." Ethan took another step before he realized he was moving. The scanner displayed a new message. Voice confirmation required. Please complete return. The aisle lights dimmed. The shelves leaned inward, or seemed to, narrowing the space around him. He could smell rain now. Not Walmart rain from wet customers and dirty mats, but road rain, summer storm rain. The kind that soaked through shirts and turned pavement black. He heard windshield wipers squeaking. He heard a phone ringing. He heard Caleb's laugh, real this time, from some old memory of them sitting in a drive-thru at midnight while Caleb tried to balance fries on the dashboard. Ethan's throat opened around the word he had held for 3 years. "I am." The scanner chirped, eager. The thing under the hoodie became very still. Ethan saw himself in the round security mirror at the end of the aisle, pale and hollow-eyed, standing over the folded blue cloth. But the reflection showed something the aisle did not. Behind the hoodie, crouched low between the shelves, was a long shape wearing Caleb's outline badly, as if a person had been remembered by something that had never seen a body from the inside. Its face was hidden, but its mouth was open too wide, waiting. Ethan bit down on the inside of his cheek hard enough to shock himself back into silence. He pressed no on the scanner. The screen went black. Every toy in the aisle began making noise at once. Plastic animals roared with dying batteries. Toy trucks beeped in reverse. A baby doll laughed in a slow, skipping loop. Ethan ran. He did not care if running invited the store to chase him anymore. He bolted out of aisle 7. As the shelves rattled behind him, and the voice that sounded like Caleb lost its softness. "Ethan, wait. Ethan, come back. Ethan, do not leave me here." He nearly slipped near the end cap, caught himself on a shelf of discounted beach towels, and stumbled into the main walkway. The scanner came back on in his hand with a shrill alarm. Frozen foods lights red. "Get below eye level." He turned toward the grocery side and saw the entire frozen section glowing red through the glass doors, a long bleeding line across the store. At the same time, the air filled with a deep mechanical hum that vibrated in his teeth. Rule 8. If the lights turn red, crawl. Ethan dropped to his hands and knees so fast pain shot up through his palms. The tile was freezing. He crawled behind a row of low freezer cases, keeping his head below the handles of the glass doors. In the red reflection, shapes moved upright where no one should have been standing. Blue vests, pale hands, smiling greeters, a boy in a red coat, and farther back, something in Caleb's hoodie walking between them with its head tilted, listening for his voice. Ethan clamped one hand over his mouth and crawled until his shoulders shook. The hum grew louder, then stopped all at once. The red lights flickered back to white. For several seconds, he stayed on the floor, cheek almost touching the tile, breath coming in sharp little pulls. The scanner beeped beside him. When he looked at the screen, the normal asset list was gone. A map of the store had appeared instead, with one route highlighted in yellow. It led through frozen foods, past the old pharmacy, and into the back room behind electronics. At the top of the screen were the words, "Manager records available. Previous returns unresolved." Ethan did not want records. He wanted a door. He wanted dawn. He wanted a world where a dead brother stayed dead and grief did not answer from toy aisles. But the front entrance was no longer an option. At the far end of the store, through the glass, the greeter stood inside now, not outside, one hand raised in a patient little wave. Ethan looked at the map again. Customer service felt miles away. Aisle 7 was behind him. Lane 11 waited somewhere in the dark with its lights still off. The only path that did not lead back through Caleb's voice was the back room. Ethan picked up the scanner, pushed himself to his feet, and followed the yellow line. Ethan followed the yellow line with the scanner held low, keeping his flashlight pointed at the floor because he no longer trusted anything at eye level. The path took him behind electronics, past a swinging employee door marked Associates Only. The door should have been locked, but it opened before he touched it, sighing inward on hinges that sounded damp. Warm air rolled out from the back room, thick with dust, cardboard, and the stale paper smell of old files. For a moment, the change in temperature felt worse than the cold. The sales floor had been dead and bright and watchful, but the back room felt hidden, like the part of the store that had kept breathing after the rest of the building shut down. Metal shelves rose on both sides, stacked with forgotten boxes, broken signage, register parts, holiday decorations, cracked plastic bins, and employee lockers with names still taped to them. The yellow line on the scanner led him past all of it to a small office behind a row of pallet jacks. The door had no label, only a clipboard nailed to the front. On the clipboard was a sign-in sheet covered in names, dates, and times, most of them written in different hands. Ethan recognized Harold Grady near the top, dated 4 years earlier. Below that were dozens of other names. Some had check marks beside them. Some had the word returned. A few had a single word written so hard the pen had torn the paper. Kept. Ethan's name was already on the last line. The time beside it was blank. His skin prickled under his shirt. Inside the office, a desk lamp was on, though he had not seen a light switch. Filing cabinets lined the wall. A corkboard above the desk was covered with old photographs, printed reports, receipts, inventory sheets, and handwritten notes pinned in layers. At first, it looked like the work of a paranoid manager trying to explain missing merchandise. Then Ethan saw the titles. Associate voice logged. Child without guardian. Customer reflection. Mismatch. Name tag appeared overnight. Return denied after sunrise. The oldest report was dated 1998, long before the store closed, back when it had still been packed with customers and carts and weekend noise. According to the first page, night employees had started finding inventory discrepancies that did not match any department. Items appeared in the system with no stock-keeping unit, no vendor, and no price. A woman's laugh. A left shoe from no known brand. A photograph of a man who had never entered the store. One report listed an item as father, lightly damaged, requesting pickup. Ethan sat down slowly because his legs no longer trusted him. The next folder was thicker. It described employees who heard relatives calling from closed aisles after midnight. A stalker followed his mother's voice into lawn and garden and came back unable to remember his own last name. A cashier scanned an unmarked music box at lane 11 and spent the rest of her shift speaking in a child's voice that was not hers. A night manager tried to unplug every register at 3:33 in the morning. The next day, his badge was found inside a locked display case with a new barcode printed across the back. None of the reports said monster. None said ghost. The closest word they used was inventory, always capitalized like a name. The inventory does not create from nothing, one note read. It catalogs what enters. It copies what is carried. Grief, guilt, fear, longing, names, voices. The store remembers emotional weight as merchandise. Do not give it confirmation. Do not scan what has no barcode. Do not answer what already knows too much. Ethan turned another page and found a photograph of Grady, younger than, standing beside a teenage girl with braces and a bright purple jacket. The note beneath it said Lily Grady, disappeared during overnight count, seasonal section, 2:18 in the morning. Not recovered. Do not respond if heard singing from garden center. Ethan's anger toward Grady twisted into something colder and more complicated. The man had not hired Ethan because he did not care. He had hired him because he already knew the shape of the trap and still came back to its edge. Maybe to study it. Maybe to feed it names that were not his daughters. Maybe because each survivor added another rule, and rules were the only thing keeping the store from spilling farther out into the world. A binder lay open on the desk under the lamp. Its cover was labeled Survivor Editions. Ethan flipped through pages of handwriting that grew shakier with each entry. Do not wave at the greeter. Do not follow the child. Crawl when frozen foods turns red. Lane 11 opens at 3:33. Each rule had a name beneath it, sometimes a date, sometimes a final message. The last completed page was signed Harold Grady. Rule 7 was not in his handwriting. It had been added on a loose sheet, clipped into the binder and written so recently the marker had not fully faded into the fibers. Ethan read the note under it and felt the room pull away from him. New subject displays strong unresolved guilt attached to deceased sibling. The inventory has identified Caleb Miller as primary return lure. Subject must not apologize. Voice capture likely if apology is spoken with intent. Return cannot be completed without voluntary confirmation. Ethan stared at the word subject until heat rose behind his eyes. That was what he was to them. To Grady. To the store. A subject. Not an employee. Not a desperate man trying to keep his lights on. Not a brother who had already lost too much. Just another person carrying something heavy enough for the place to catalog. The scanner beeped on the desk, even though he had not set it there. Its screen showed a new prompt. Role assignment pending. Overnight verifier may become replacement manager upon failed departure. Ethan understood then what the store wanted from him if it could not have Caleb. It wanted someone who knew inventory, someone who followed lists, someone who could be taught to maintain the rules from the inside. The people who failed were not all taken the same way. Some became voices. Some became items. Some became greeters, or children, or things in blue vests with no name tags. And some, maybe the ones who lasted longest, became part of the system that brought the next desperate person through the door. From the sales floor, the intercom clicked on. The voice that came through was Grady's, faint and warped by static. If you found the records, you are ahead of schedule. Do not trust the scanner after 3. Do not let Lane 11 give you something you want. Ethan grabbed the scanner, but the screen had already changed. It displayed a live camera feed of customer service. On the counter lay the folded rules. Beside them was the envelope of cash. And standing behind the desk, wearing Ethan's temporary badge, was someone with his face, waiting patiently for him to come back. The thing wearing Ethan's face stood behind customer service on the scanner screen, still as a mannequin and patient as closing time. It had his jacket, his temporary badge, his tired eyes, even the small scar above his right eyebrow from when Caleb had hit him with a plastic baseball bat when they were kids. The only difference was the smile. Ethan did not smile like that. Not anymore. The double lifted one hand toward the camera in a small, friendly wave, and somewhere out on the sales floor, the greeter by the entrance knocked on the glass from the inside. Ethan checked the clock on the office wall. 3:29 in the morning. His stomach dropped so hard, he almost doubled over. 3:33 was coming. Lane 11. The item on the belt. Something he would recognize. Something that did not belong to him anymore. The scanner vibrated in his hand, and the map vanished. In its place appeared a prompt. Return to customer service to complete shift. Ethan looked at the binder, at the rule sheet copies, at the notes from people who had survived just long enough to leave warnings behind. Do not trust the scanner after 3. Grady had said it over the intercom. So Ethan did the opposite. He turned the scanner face down on the desk and backed away until the screen went dark. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then every filing cabinet in the office clicked open at once. Papers rustled inside them, though there was no breeze. From the hallway, Caleb's voice whispered, "Ethan, you are going the wrong way." Ethan pressed both hands over his mouth and forced himself not to answer. He took the loose page with Rule 7 from the binder, folded it into his pocket with the original rules, and grabbed an old walkie-talkie from a charging dock on the desk. It should not have worked, but when he pressed the side button, static crackled through it. "Grady," he whispered, "if you can't hear me, I am in the back office." A burst of static answered. Then Grady's voice came through, thin and frightened. "Do not go to customer service. It is waiting for your place on the list." "Where do I go?" Ethan asked before remembering that every spoken word felt like bait now. The walkie hissed. "Lane 11 will open whether you go there or not. The only way through is to make the system count itself." Ethan did not understand until he looked at the dead scanner on the desk. Barcodes. Returns. Verification. The inventory needed confirmation. It needed people to scan what it offered, answer what it asked, apologize when it begged. It could lure, copy, display, and remember, but it still needed some kind of voluntary input. The store was not a predator breaking down a door. It was a register waiting for someone to complete a transaction. At 3:33, every light on the sales floor snapped on. Ethan saw the glow flare under the office door a second before the sound came. 11 checkout lanes waking up at once. Conveyor belts rolled. Receipt printers chattered. Registers chimed in bright, cheerful tones that belonged to normal mornings and tired cashiers, not a dead store before dawn. The intercom breathed. "Ethan Daniel Miller, please proceed to lane 11. Final return ready for verification." The voice was perfect this time. Not almost Caleb. Not the cheerful announcement voice. It was Ethan's own voice, played back from somewhere above him, calm and reasonable. He picked up the scanner by the strap without looking at the screen and walked out of the office. The sales floor had changed again. The shelves were full now, packed with impossible merchandise. Old birthday cards with his handwriting, rain-wet fast food receipts from nights he barely remembered, Caleb's cracked phone case, the baseball cards Ethan had sold, a coffee cup from the funeral home, every small object grief had ever attached itself to and hidden in the back of his mind. Blue-vested employees stood at the ends of the aisles with no name tags, watching. The boy in the red coat sat cross-legged by the pharmacy, turning his blank face toward the sound of Ethan's shoes. Near the front, the double at customer service tilted its head, waiting for him to choose the wrong route. Ethan kept his eyes low and moved toward the checkout lanes. Frozen foods flared red to his left. The hum rolled across the floor, deep enough to rattle the shelves. He dropped immediately and crawled, dragging the scanner by the strap, staying below the freezer handles as reflections gathered in the red glass. He saw Caleb walking upright behind him in the reflection, close enough that Ethan could see the hoodie sleeves hanging over familiar hands. "I am not mad," Caleb said softly. Ethan kept crawling. "I never blamed you." Ethan bit his tongue and crawled faster. The red lights turned white. He stood and ran the last few yards toward lane 11. All the other lanes were open and empty, their belts moving with nothing on them. Lane 11 had one item waiting halfway down the conveyor. Caleb's burned old phone, its screen lit with the missed call from Ethan on the night of the accident. Beside it sat the envelope of cash Grady had promised, as if payment and punishment were part of the same sale. The scanner came alive in Ethan's hand, bright green line pulsing across the glass. Scan to complete return. Caleb stood beyond the belt. He looked whole now, almost warm, almost real, with tired eyes and that crooked half-smile Ethan had spent 3 years trying not to remember. "You do not have to carry it anymore," Caleb said. "Just say it. Just scan the phone, and I can come home." Ethan's hand shook so badly the scanner beam jumped over the conveyor. Every part of him wanted to believe it. That was the worst cruelty of it. Not the blank-faced child, not the greeter, not the thing wearing his face. This, the offer to undo one sentence, one phone call, one rainy night. Ethan looked at Caleb, then at the phone, then at the scanner. Rule 10 said do not scan the item on the belt. Rule 7 said do not say sorry. Rule 4 said the intercom could be answered only if it said his full name correctly, but the records had taught him the deeper rule. Correct did not mean safe. Recognition was the hook. Confirmation was the trap. Ethan raised the scanner, but not toward the phone. He turned it toward its own white barcode sticker on the back of the device, the little asset tag half peeled from years of use. If the scanner was the tool that made things merchandise, then it was merchandise too. The green beam caught the sticker. The device shrieked. Every register froze. The screen flashed. Invalid loop. Ethan pressed the trigger again. Invalid loop. He pressed it a third time and shouted, "Count yourself." The words tore out of him. Not an apology, not a name, not permission. The scanner emitted one long tone that rose until the lights flickered across the entire store. The conveyor on lane 11 reversed. Caleb's phone slid backward, away from Ethan, then stopped. The figure beyond the belt lost its smile. For a second, it did not look like Caleb at all. It looked like every memory of Caleb stacked badly inside a shape that could not decide which one would hurt Ethan most. Then the belt under the phone split into lines of green scanner light, reflecting back and forth between the register and the handheld device, reading itself, rejecting itself, reading itself again. Receipt printers exploded into motion. Paper poured from every register in long white curls. The blue-vested employees turned toward the lanes at once. The greeter stopped smiling. The double at customer service opened its mouth in Ethan's voice and screamed without sound. Ethan dropped the scanner onto the belt and ducked behind the register as the store began to count itself. The counting lasted until the lights began to fail. One by one, the registers printed themselves empty, spilling receipts across the floor until the checkout lanes looked buried under white paper. Ethan stayed behind the register with his hands over his head, listening to the store tear through its own records. Voices rose from every aisle, his own voice, Grady's voice, the child's voice, Caleb's voice, all speaking over. one another in clipped retail phrases that almost made sense. Return denied. Quantity mismatch. Item not found. Customer waiting. Then, at some point, the screaming stopped. Ethan opened his eyes to gray morning light leaking through the front windows. The store was dark again, really dark this time, with only the weak, blue shape of dawn pressing against the glass. The scanner on lane 11 had melted into a warped piece of plastic, and Caleb's phone was gone. So was the thing wearing his brother's face. So was the double at customer service. Ethan wanted to run, but Rule 11 held him in place harder than any lock. At sunrise, leave only through a door opened by someone who casts a shadow. The automatic doors slid open by themselves at 6:01. Ethan did not move. Cold air drifted in from the parking lot, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and weeds. Something behind the open doors waited politely, giving him a chance to make the last mistake. At 6:07, a key turned in the employee entrance. Harold Grady stepped inside with two Ashford police officers behind him. All three cast long shadows across the tile. Only then did Ethan walk out. Grady did not ask what happened. He looked at the receipts, the dead scanner, the closed lane 11, and his face folded in on itself with a grief Ethan finally understood. He handed Ethan an envelope. Inside was $600 in cash and one receipt. It read, one overnight shift, paid. One brother, pending. One apology, uncollected. Ethan quit before he was ever officially hired. Grady told him the store would stay closed, but I have driven past it since, and some nights the parking lot lights are on. I learned that guilt can survive without becoming a door, but only if you stop trying to buy back the dead. I survived. I lost the lie that saying sorry would fix anything. And I thought the loop had ended until the receipt printer appeared on my kitchen table 3 weeks later, unplugged, dustless, waiting. Every morning at 3:33, it prints one line. Last night it said, Ethan Miller, temporary associate, return window still open.